at and paying attention to on the drought side is this evaporative stress index, the ESI. And just over the last month, the composite is showing these standardized deviations from normal evaporative demand, and you can see some areas in the region really starting to pop out through central Illinois, western Indiana, as well as through Wisconsin and into the Dakotas. Again, that area of western South Dakota into northeast Wyoming. Some of those areas really in the last month, you're seeing that evaporative stress really ramp up, and again, we can relate a lot of that to what we have seen in temperatures. And if we look at that change in the composite over the last 2 months, we start seeing more of the region being impacted by this through Nebraska and Iowa and through much of the eastern grain belt. So what this is showing us is we have seen quite a bit of change in the region over the last 30 to 60 days, and mainly in the last 30 to 45 days we've seen this really with the temperature demand, as well as where we're seeing precipitation. The ESI is picking up some of these areas quite well. As we go back a little bit further from mid-March to mid-June with the 90-day precipitation, again, we see these areas through Missouri and southern Iowa and through Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, even down into Kentucky. That area of dryness where only 50 to 70% of normal, pretty common through that area, that pocket of dryness in Minnesota along the Dakotas border, as well as western South Dakota and northeast Wyoming. We really can start seeing some trends in some of these areas. And the other areas, again, quite excessive through parts of western Wyoming, Nebraska, Kansas, where we had some of those heavy rain events that really help push totals over. We start looking at the departures from normal in the lower left, and we can see that as we go to 90 days, those departures through southern Iowa, through Missouri, into Illinois, they start building a little bit more, and we're about 6 to 8 inches in places below normal just over the last 90 days. So coupled with those temperatures that we are seeing, you can see why on the products such as the ESI, some of those areas are really starting to stand out. And so March through May, looking at, I already showed this, so I'm going to pass that. Year-to-date precipitation, so if we start looking at the calendar year, again, in the upper right, that percent of normal, some of those same areas of Iowa and Missouri into southeast Kansas, into Illinois and Indiana, those are really standing out. And there is a word of caution with this, though, because we did notice that for the calendar year we are seeing 70% of normal, 50 to 70% in some of those places, but that was coming off a very wet December period as well, where there was full recharge of the soil profile in a lot of those areas. And so even though the year-to-date has been dry, we are not seeing some of the impacts developing as rapidly because there is moisture in the soil. Again, those areas in Minnesota and the border with the Dakotas, as well as western South Dakota, those are standing out year-to-date as well. But other areas are not so bad. And that departure from normal map, I have highlighted that one region. And again, we're talking 6 to 9 inches below normal for the calendar year in some of those areas. And coupled with the heat that we've started seeing, probably an area that we're going to really be focusing on quite closely with drought monitoring, and also have heard the word flash drought already coming out of some of these areas here. Again, some of the localized conditions are really going to be variable due to where you did or did not see precipitation events and types of soil, types of crops, when the crop was planted, etc. And also it's going to go back to what we saw in December, where those heaviest rains fell, what kind of soil conditions did they fall on, was there good infiltration, etc. So really going to be watching that area that I've highlighted. Year-to-date temperatures, again, not encouraging for 2016. We're halfway through the year, and we are already seeing that most areas are anywhere from 2 to 5 degrees above normal for the calendar year, and really can see that up through the Dakotas into parts of Nebraska and Kansas and Iowa, Minnesota, even into Wyoming and Montana. That definitely has been this pocket of heat that has lingered. Probably would have been even higher had we not seen some of the wetness in May that chopped down some of the temperatures in areas that did see quite significant precipitation through the month of May. But pushing for well above normal for 2016 so far. As we get into the hydrology of the region, the 28-day average stream flow data, looking at anything that's green or in the blues or the blacks for record highs, and that's what we mostly see through the region. So that is telling me that any of the stress that we're seeing as far as dryness goes is more on the short term and not long-term conditions like we're seeing out on the west coast or even up in the northeast. So as we go in a little bit closer into several of the basins, we have the Missouri River Basin here, and what we're looking at, a lot of the blues coming out of Wyoming and into Nebraska really starts being in direct relationship to the rapid snowmelt up in the mountains and how much water is going through those systems, thus the overtopping of Pathfinder out in Wyoming as just so much water was coming at once, again related to temperatures. As we go into more of the upper Missouri River Basin, we do start seeing some below normal stream gauges for this time of year, and that is something that we will continue to watch as we go into the lower portions of the Missouri Basin. Almost all the gauges are above to well above normal for where they should be at a 28-day period for this time of year. The upper Mississippi Basin, quite similar. Most all the gauges, again, are running normal to above normal, except when you get up into portions of Minnesota at the headwaters, we are seeing some below normal readings. And quite similar into the Ohio River Basin as well. The northern reaches, we are seeing some drier gauges, but we have had a rebound in several of the gauges, especially through places like Kentucky and Ohio and West Virginia that were a little bit drier but did pick up some rain in the last 60 days or so with enough runoff to help influence some improvement on the stream flows in those areas. But again, going to start watching these as we go forward as the dryness that we've seen is extended any further. So looking at some Missouri River Basin data as far as the mountain snowpack and the water associated with it, you can see that the 2015-2016 line is in blue, or the portion of the graph in blue, and we can see what the averages are on the red line. And so really we're running just a little bit below average on the total above Fort Peck, as well as from Fort Peck to Garrison. Those curves are just a little bit below as we get into the summer months, but not too bad. We can see some of the wetter and drier periods as well that are highlighted with the other years. And this is coming off of the Army Corps of Engineer reports. We also can look at some of the same data on the Platte River Basin. And what we'd seen as we went past the curve average back in March, again, a lot of water going through the North Platte Basin as well as the South Platte Basin. Again, a lot of this is related to how the snowpack was starting to diminish and melt off in the Rocky Mountains and feeding into both these basins. So right now, about 103% of average, and in this area. So looking at the Great Lakes and the water levels, we have 4 of the lakes highlighted here, and we can see that the red line is the average, so all of them are running above average right now, and we are anticipating those levels to start declining as we go into the summer months. The forecast portion of these time series are in red, and so we do see decline through all of the Great Lakes as we get into summer months. And we look at the water temperatures. Most of the Great Lakes are seeing water temperatures that are above normal. Lake Superior has still some cool water in the 40s, below 50 degrees through much of the lake, and that's has had a trend of warming up as well. But most of the lakes are seeing water temperatures that are at or slightly above for this time of year. Looking at soil moisture anomalies, this is going down to the total column of moisture in the soil and looking at how many millimeters behind the NL-DAS model ensemble is showing. And I have 3 areas highlighted, and if you think back to the maps I was showing with the departure from normal precipitation, that area in Iowa, Illinois, and Missouri where we had 9 inches below normal over the calendar year, we can see that even with that departure, the soils had held up pretty well, and we are only seeing departures about 50 to 100 millimeters through the first June. Now, other portions of the region, we are seeing a little bit more significant dryness as you look at the total column of moisture, and most of that drying out again is going to be in the top, probably the top foot of soil right now, as the deeper moisture is still there and in the soils. And so from an agricultural perspective, that will be good for holding off some impacts to crops if we get the roots down to that moisture. With some of the earlier moisture in some regions, there could be issues with root development and just how well it was, because to tap into that deeper moisture, the roots, especially on a corn crop, are going to have to go down several feet to tap into it. Even though the moisture is there, we're going to have to continue to watch that. One thing to watch on this model as well is the trends over time. I had been looking at it a couple times a week now for the last couple weeks, and some of these areas of deficits have been expanding through that time as well, which makes sense with what we have seen weather-wise. So looking at the NASS soil moisture conditions, and the 2 I like to look at are the combination of the very short and short on both the topsoil and then the subsoil. And you know, we are seeing places in Michigan, you know, topsoil right now is 46% short to very short. Indiana 31%, 31% in Ohio as well. And so we are seeing some drying out of that topsoil. We had some reports coming from Indiana that they were starting to get concerned, but did get some rain this week that kind of slowed things down a little bit on that drying out. And then speaking of the subsoil again, we are seeing most areas that are fairly adequate as far as how much of the state is seeing deficits at the very short to short range. Again, Michigan 28%, really leading the way, 23% in Ohio. And these are areas that did not get as good a recharge going into the spring, meaning over the fall and winter months, not as much moisture went into those soil profiles. So again, something to watch, and seeing how these change week to week with the weekly NASS reports, as well as the soil moisture models that we can look at. So this time of year we start thinking about where are we for crop development and crop production on the agricultural side, and so we start looking at growing degree days. And so from March 1 through early June, most of the region is normal to above normal for growing degree days, and if we cut that off to April 1st, most of the area is normal. A few areas through southern Illinois and Missouri that are showing below normal growing degree days based on that April 1st time frame. So the U.S. Drought Monitor which was released this morning, we are seeing very little drought through the region. The area of western South Dakota through northeast Wyoming is showing a small area of D2. That is the only area of severe drought in the entire region. Most areas are only seeing abnormally dry conditions or only moderate drought. And reason being is we have had a fairly wet late spring to the first part of June, to late May through the first part of June, and then we have seen conditions change a little bit. If you see that area of abnormally dry in Iowa through Missouri and western Illinois, definitely can correlate that quite well to year-to-date precipitation. But then again, if we go back to precipitation from the fall through now, we are not seeing as big a deficits and even some surpluses yet in areas. But as we look at the conditions as a whole for the U.S., currently we only have about 14% of the country, the CONUS U.S. in drought. Compared at the start of the water year, October 1st, we were a little over 31%. So much of that improvement has been out in the western U.S. over this time. We have about 67 million people impacted by drought in the CONUS right now. So that's something to see how that number changes as we go through summer as well. Looking at the region again, we zoom into this region. Right now we have about 24% of the area in abnormally dry or worse conditions, and just about 2.5% in any drought right now. The D1 and D2 spots that are showing up in Wyoming, Montana, through the South Dakota, and then in a small pocket along the North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota borders. But we did see a pretty good expansion of D0 this last week. So a week ago we were at 15% in D0 or worse, and now we're at 24%. So almost a 10% jump up in just 1 week. And I know myself and many others are remembering how the summer of 2012 started, and very eerily similar to what we're seeing right now. So I think there are a lot of people that are on edge and seeing exactly where we're going to go in the next 6 to 8 weeks. If we look at the Missouri watershed, last week to this week, about a 5% change in D0 through D4, about a 1% increase in D1, and the D2 conditions in Wyoming and South Dakota stayed about the same this week. So over the last month, this is what the U.S. Drought Monitor has done. We can see the 1-class changes for the worse in yellow, a 2-class change in the yellowish-orange, a 3-class change in orange. And so right now the 1-class changes to D0 really have popped up through the region from Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, even through the Dakotas and reaching into Wyoming and the Nebraska Panhandle as well. So we can see those areas starting to pop up, and a lot of that change has been in a few weeks. So going into some regional impacts, I really like this picture, really showing that water overtopping the dam at Pathfinder and going over the edge, and just showing that, you know, there has been a glut of water coming out of the Rocky Mountains into some of the waterways coming into the region. Again, temperatures are playing a big role in that if we don't have the rapid warm-up, we don't have the rapid melt-off as well. And so water managers have been scrambling to make sure that they are keeping under their guide curves, as well as adequately getting water downstream as they need to make room. So flash drought. We've already heard that term come up a couple times on the U.S. Drought Monitor discussions, and so we just start looking at the last couple months, the last 60 days, where are we seeing those pockets of dryness? And I think if we are already talking about some flash drought coming out of northeast Missouri. I know Pat Gannan has thrown that term out there already, and we've also heard it come up from a few other people through the Midwest. Okay, are we seeing this developing as rapidly as we think we are? One of the big issues is with any drought, if you're not seeing impacts right away, it's really hard to gauge just how quickly you're progressing. And so when we look at this region, agricultural impacts are going to be the main ones that we see right away. And without us seeing those right now, we're really left to the devices of our indicators. So the more indicators and the validation of those indicators that we are using really do help, as well as the reports from the field. We are really getting some good condition reports from extension people that are validating this dryness that we're seeing in these pockets through Iowa, Missouri, and Illinois, as well as up in Minnesota and western South Dakota and northeast Wyoming. And one of the reports coming out of Wyoming was just how the rapid warm-up and the dryness has impacted forage production. That typically they get 5 to 6 months of grazing on some of these pastures, and they're talking now it could only be 2 or 3 months as the cool season grasses were really impacted, and there are producers out there already discussing what should they do with their cattle and should they start liquidating any animals even as early as June. So that's something that has been developing and is starting to already impact producers out in that part of the world, and seeing some similar conditions through western South Dakota and dipping into the Nebraska Panhandle as well, just that impact to grazing on those cool season grasses. The early June extreme heat has been something that really has poked its head over the last couple weeks. I've mentioned already just some daily record highs already talked about in South Dakota, 100 degrees in Aberdeen on June 9th and 95 in Sioux Falls on that same date. And then out in western South Dakota, Rapid City closed the week with consecutive daily record highs of 98 and 103 on June 10th and 11th. And then in Wyoming, some daily record highs for June 10th surged in Grable and Worland, and then the following day we were 102 in Valentine, Nebraska, and 100 degrees in Mitchell, South Dakota. So when you start thinking about heat through this region, typically it takes time to build up, and we start talking about this in late July, the first part of August, and to see these numbers already in the first part of June, that is a point of contention as far as what does this mean going forward. And looking at the map of extreme maximum temperatures from June 5th through the 11th that the Climate Prediction Center put out, you can see that through much of the region we were in the 90s to even some 100-degree readings all through most of the region outside of the areas of the upper Great Lakes and Wisconsin, Minnesota, and northeast North Dakota. So again, we are dealing with some very rapid maximum extreme temperatures throughout much of the region. So the last part of the presentation here will be going into the climate outlooks and what we can anticipate going forward. So I'll go through the 7-day precipitation, the 8 to 14 day, the ENSO outlook, monthly and seasonal, and also the autumn and winter. I took out the spring outlook, and the seasonal drought outlook is included as well. So over the next 7 days, the QPF is showing that we have good opportunities from the Dakotas down through the Missouri River into Iowa, Missouri, and Illinois. Some decent precipitation as far as Ohio and southern Michigan goes. We are seeing some influence of the event that's going to be impacting the mid-Atlantic here over the next couple days, impacting portions of Ohio as well. So again, we need to look at these. This time of year, they can be the QPF can be very problematic with convective precipitation. It could really be hit or miss as we don't see the large, well-organized systems moving through, and especially with the heat in the region, it's going to be sometimes tough to break that cap for convection to take place. So it's something that we'll need to be watching as well, just what the impact of the temperatures do on precipitation potential. But if these numbers hold out, it looks like at least most areas are going to see some precipitation outside of Wyoming, Colorado, and western Nebraska and Kansas. So we will see what we have over the next 7 days. The 8 to 14 day outlook, I have temperatures on the left and precipitation chances on the right. And what we are seeing is that heat that has been building over the southwest continues to entrench itself with very much above normal chances of above normal temperatures through much of the country at this time, outside of the upper Midwest and into the mid-Atlantic and New England. Most of the country is probably anticipating seeing above normal temperatures over the next couple weeks. What does precipitation look like during that time? We are seeing that much of this region is showing normal or equal chances, with a few pockets of above normal chances of above normal precipitation centered in Colorado and Michigan. So we will see again how this plays out over the next 8 to 14 days. If we don't see normal or even above normal precipitation with those temperatures and the antecedent conditions of the last several weeks, we could definitely be talking about flash drought more widespread through the region. in the next 2 weeks. Now, as we start talking about our ENSO conditions or what's going on out currently, we are still seeing temperatures that are slightly above normal for this time of year with the mid-June update, but we are anticipating La Nina development. So if you see the average of all the different models on the solid yellow line, we can see that by this summer we should be seeing temperatures about 0.75 degrees Celsius below normal, the cooling of those waters out in the Pacific, and that should maintain itself all the way through the first part of winter before the trend starts poking its way up again back in the February, March, April timeframe. So with that being said, we can show that right now the probabilistic forecast is showing for La Nina development above 70% chance going forward, and really seeing peaking right now in the first part of the winter. So what does that mean as we are anticipating a La Nina winter? Typically through this region we have a little bit more opportunity of cold air to come in out of Canada, especially over the Dakotas and the northern portion of the region. We do have a wetter signal over the Ohio River Valley, but also some warmer conditions associated with that. Again, these areas can migrate significantly based on where those jet streams set up. So in anticipation of a La Nina winter, this is really what we could be looking at going forward. One thing we do see is that dryness in the winter to the south of us really can anticipate impacting any spring precipitation then if those air masses are not, if they're being impacted by the dry conditions to the south of us. So that's something to pay attention and watch as we do go forward this winter into the first part of spring next year. So our monthly and seasonal outlooks, we have July across the top and then July, August, September across the bottom. So for much of the summer through the first part of fall, we are seeing temperatures for the most part everywhere in the U.S. outside of the equal chances in July through portions of the plains into the southern plains, very good opportunities of above normal temperatures now through the end of September. With the trend that we've seen right now of January through mid-June of above normal temperatures, we probably have a good opportunity of ending 2016 as a very warm year. Precipitation, equal chances through July through the entire region. For much of the region, July, August, September is equal chances with an enhanced area of above normal chances of above normal precipitation through centered on South Dakota in that July through September period. So that will be something that we watch going forward as well. Even equal chances of normal or above normal or below normal precipitation. It's really going to get down to timing, and it's really going to get down to how much of this heat stays sustained through that time period. So as far as impacts to agriculture and later on into water supply and water availability if dryness continues. So the autumn outlook of September, October, November, we see the heat sustain itself. So again, much of the country, if not all the country, is being impacted by above normal chances of above normal temperatures, and for the most part in the autumn period, we are looking at equal chances of above or below normal precipitation through much of the region. Again, this can really change over time, so it's something to follow the trends on both these to see what we are seeing during the next several updates as well, and also how quickly La Nina conditions may start influencing some of these areas too. And we'll go into the winter, December, January, February. Very much a La Nina temperature forecast. I talked about the above normal chances of cooler than normal temperatures through the northern tier of the U.S., and we're seeing that through Montana, the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, the Wharf to the south. And then that wetter signal through the Ohio River Basin into Michigan is showing up as well on the winter precipitation outlook. Again, with that dryness to the south, pretty La Nina outlook right now coming out of CPC for the winter months. And I did not go all the way into the spring with the outlooks this time. So seasonal drought outlook. Again, looks very eerily similar to what we saw about this time in 2012, where there wasn't much anticipation of drought development in the region, which is really what we're seeing right now. So hopefully this forecast verifies, and my phone won't ring all summer, but if it doesn't, it could be very busy, especially for those in the state climate offices and the regional centers here, as well as the National Drought Mitigation Center, where if this drought does start developing further, we're going to see a lot of people really perk up, and you're going to hear the questions, is this going to be another 2012? So right now, we are not anticipating that, and hopefully I can come back and say, yes, we were correct. So with that being said, I got a quick summary. Most of the region has been warmer than normal and drier than normal over the last mean has been well above normal for temperatures over the region. A rapid melt of the Rocky Mountain snow has sent a great deal of water into the Platte and Missouri River basins. We had some lowland flooding issues along those basins earlier, but those have subsided quite a bit here in the last week or so. Drought is not an issue currently in the region, but we are watching conditions closely as temperatures are stressing conditions along with the lack of rain. Subsoil moisture is good based upon full recharge of the soil profile back in December. Flash drought developing in places already. And La Nina will continue to intensify. We should anticipate a La Nina winter for 2016 into 2017. And for further information, again, we have these links that you can go to find additional information. And with that, I'll take questions, and here is the contact information for many of the people involved in these calls. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Brian. So now is the question time, and I see a couple of people have either raised their hand or have a specific question. So what I'm going to do is I'll start at the top, alphabetically, I guess, and we'll start with Benjamin. Let me see if I can unmute you relatively easily, or not. Huh, it says attendee cannot be unmuted. I don't know why that would be. Stand by. Let me see if I can do that with anybody else. Oh, I see. If you, and you're on the phone. I don't understand. Benjamin, enter if you can. I guess maybe it's too late. Call back in and 101. That enables me to unmute you. Otherwise, I can't do it, I think. Then Laurel Foreman, let me see if I can do you. I can. Go ahead, Laurel.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, yes, I can hear you.
Oh, good. Just wondered if this webinar is going to be updated to the MRCC site fairly soon this time?
Yeah, we should be able to have it at one of the two, both RCCs here within, let's see, what is today, Thursday, probably sometime tomorrow. I won't say that either one of them, I won't put them both on the spot and say that they'll both be done today, but hopefully by sometime tomorrow. And make sure you write down both of those recordings, just in case someone's not at one of the two regional climate centers and can't get it updated until Monday or something like that. You can always go to the other one, and it's good to have that redundancy, by the way. Any other questions, Laurel?
Not.
Okay. Okay. Now we'll go down to. I thought I had another question down below. Let's see. There's Ken Lovett. Let's see if we can unmute you. Yeah, Ken, go ahead.
Yeah, Brian, I was following up on your UNSO presentation there. What caused the subsurface temperatures to start to raise after we've been watching for the springtime? Those temperatures drop off and bring in La Nina, and all of a sudden they started going back up.
The temperatures in
The subsurface subsurface temperatures in the Pacific that that we've been watching. I mean, causing everything.
So, yeah, Brian, you can try that, and if
no,
not, we have a couple other people.
I was not aware that they had reversed trends, so I have not been following it that closely.
Yeah.
If someone else wants to take a stab, please do.
Yeah, I would say that Ken, I'm not sure which data platform you're looking at, but I think generally the temperatures at the surface of the Pacific have slowly sort of morphed into neutral, if not below normal, in some parts of the eastern Pacific, which of course is a good signifier of us changing at least to a neutral, if not La Nina situation. It's in transition, I guess you could say. Subsurface, yeah, there's a lot of cool of water below normal temperature water that does seem to be rising up to the surface as well. That is very indicative of early onset of La Nina. There may be pulses that sort of push that back occasionally, back to something that doesn't look as La Nina-ish. And to be honest with you, the outlook what Brian has up on the screen right now shows La Nina sort of coming into play. Let's say it says it does have the June, July, August sort of pegging it below 0.5, which is our indicator for officially sort of signifying La Nina. But it has to last more than a few months for it to be classified as a La Nina. And if you look at the yellow line, which is sort of the median line there, it never, it never really gets that strong. So no one is trying to classify this particular La Nina as a strong one yet. Most of what I have heard from the folks in NOAA is that it's they're looking at this moment, looking for a weak to moderate one. Which means that and La Nina is not as easy of a forecast, if you will. It doesn't provide us as much detail as El Nino does. So not to say that it doesn't provide us anything, but it's less instructive, I guess, in terms of the long-term seasonal outlook. So beware of that. The other thing I'd say is this group, among others, hopefully we will be putting out a little more information on what La Nina actually means, and for different parts of this region, basically from the Rockies to Great Lakes, and we hope to get that information out sometime later this summer in sort of a briefing, one-page briefing material that you can use hopefully in some way.
Okay, so just as a follow-up then, if the cooler subsurface temps are warming, is that going to further delay the onset or just weaken it as in general? Or, yeah. I mean, I know you can't say specifically, but in general, it would weaken it or make it delay its onset?
Yeah, both those things are definitely in the cards if that pool of cool air doesn't kind of get realized and stay that way for a certain amount of time.
Doug, this is Dennis. I looked at sea surface temperatures, and there were a couple little blips at the surface that showed up in the last couple frames of the loop I was looking at. I don't think they're anything major. The subsurface temperatures are pretty cool. So, I mean, there may be a slight delay, but that's part of how the sea surface temperatures change. We look like we're on a pretty good progression towards the La Nina.
Okay.
Yeah, and that can change, but it's unlikely. Okay, it's unlikely because we really are pushing a heck of a lot of water. It really is a huge region, and for it to reverse course, it is tough. It's tough. I'm not saying it can't happen, but it would be, let's just say it's unlikely.
So
okay,
almost go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to follow up with, so this is more of a transitional phenomena that would typically occur. We would see these fluctuations as we move forward, and this could be a fluctuation.
You see those fluctuations even in some of the stronger episodes of either La Nina or of El Nino, and yes, it worries us because we've bet on one way or we've bet the other way in terms of our outlook and forecast. But generally things just don't change on a dime, and there is a pattern normally that they follow, and we're hoping this one continues in that particular pattern.
Okay, thanks, guys.
You bet. Now let's go back to Benjamin, who I denied earlier. Benjamin, you're on if you can hear me, or if you can.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I had a question about the cornfield picture that was posted from Missouri.
Yeah.
And was wondering, was indicative of something bad or moisture stress?
Yeah, go ahead, Brian. Yeah, as we see, I'm going to try and find the photo here. As cornfields are stressed, meaning either by moisture, temperatures, or a combination of both, we will see the plant respond, and one of the response mechanisms is leaf curling. So that is indicative of plant stress. And as we move forward and we get closer to the crucial pollination periods, which depending on when that plant was planted, typically is in the first part of July, so within the next several weeks. If we continue to see stress like that on a corn plant, it will start impacting yield or yield potential as well.
Basically what the corn is trying to do is meet the needs of when its stomates are open. So it's curling to try to reduce the exposure to the sunlight and reducing that exchange through the stomates. The common term for it is called pineapple corn because it looks like the leaf of a pineapple.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Benjamin?
That's all.
Okay. Let's see, Jerry Oster. Let's see. Yep, you're unmuted. Jerry, you're still there. Let's see. I have your question posted over here somewhere here. What are the chances of above to much above normal temperatures next month in the northern plains? And while you're shifting to that, Brian, the chances in the northern plains, if we're talking more or less South and North Dakota, and we'll just say Minnesota, Montana, the chances are slightly, or sort of slightly above normal, if you will. So if you hedge that at all, if you say, you know, looking at sort of three categories, the preponderance is that there's slightly more likelihood of above normal temperatures across the northern plains, as the map for July shows. I think you're asking about the next month. Yeah, not a strong indication of above normal temperatures, but it is there. Hopefully that answered your question. And let's see any other questions I have. Jerry, Laurel, okay. And that's all the questions I have at the moment. Anybody else? If you have a question, raise your hand. I'm looking through here. I don't see anything. You know, the last thing, I guess, Brian, I think it's probably important that people understand a little bit more about a flash drought, and I can't think of anybody else more able to speak about that than you, and why that can be an issue. I think we touched on it a little bit with the corn crop curling earlier. There can be soil moisture, and you can have a flash drought if you have certain conditions. And could you just speak to that just a bit more before we get off this call? Because it's going to be an issue between now and the next call, I'm sure.
Well, and looking at even some of those areas that have had above normal precipitation over the last 30 days or even the last 90 days, as we see meteorological conditions change so rapidly, meaning that we went from a warmer, wetter environment to still a warmer environment, but now it's dried out. Several things can happen to have conditions associated with the flash drought start up. One can be that these agricultural concerns are starting to show up rapidly, where maybe just a few weeks ago everything was looking fairly good, pastures were looking good, there was adequate soil moisture in the topsoil, and crops were progressing like normal, and then all of a sudden you kick in the heat, the dryness kicks in. I mentioned poor rooting on corn crops. These plants haven't been forced to go and find moisture, and so you start seeing immediate stress just on the nature of the preceding environment. And these are things that happen quickly, meaning that it's not something that, oh, we're seeing hints of it here in June, and by August they're entrenched. It's probably something that with a flash drought you're seeing conditions change on the matter of 2 or 3 weeks, 4 weeks or at the most, and basically it's a complete reversal of where you were a month earlier to the local conditions. And so some of the other pictures that were coming out of Missouri were dormant grass conditions already on the University of Missouri campus, that instead of green grass everything was already yellow, where a month prior we were talking about how much rain we'd seen through the region. So temperatures, and not only temperatures but even some of the windier days that we've seen, it really starts taking that moisture out of not only soil, but it starts impacting the plants, both crops, gardens, lawns, etc. And so you see immediate impacts where just a short time earlier you didn't have any.
Yep.
I guess that's my best way of identifying what it means to be in a flash drought compared to a typical drought that slowly develops over several months to half a year.
Right. So the conditions that take that are warmer than normal temperatures, often wind, and actually often drier air moving through with that air. It doesn't always have to be that much drier, but you know, if you see, if you will, dew points in the mid or lower 60s or less, depending on where you are, that can help get those temperatures up really high and actually cause more evapotranspiration. Any other comments from the other panelists on the call, or lingering questions? Okay. I'll say thank you very much. Our next call, I believe, is July, is it 21st? Yep.
21st, yep.
Stuart Foster, the state climatologist from Kentucky, will be the presenter on that one. So thank you all very much. If you have any other questions, you can contact us at any time and ask questions. So thank you, and talk to you next month. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.